The sun had already begun its descent behind the tall buildings of downtown when Officer James Mercer pulled his police cruiser into the parking lot of the 7th Street Cafe. He rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the weight of 3 days with barely any sleep. The Anderson identity theft case had consumed his every waking hour. His boss wanted results and he needed them fast. Just one more stop, he muttered to himself, checking the photo on his phone one more time. The image showed a grainy security camera capture of a young woman with dark shoulder-length hair, approximately 5'5", wearing a blue jacket. The tip had come in just 20 minutes ago. Someone matching the description had been spotted at this cafe. Inside the busy cafe, 22-year-old Sophia Chen sat in the corner booth, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Her laptop was open as she worked on her graduate thesis. She had been there for hours, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a navy blue cardigan over a simple white t-shirt. Sophia looked up briefly when the bell above the door jingled, then returned to her work. She didn't notice the police officer scanning the room, his eyes narrowing when they landed on her. Officer Mercer felt a surge of adrenaline. The woman in the corner matched the basic description: young Asian female, dark hair, blue top. After days of dead ends, he wasn't going to let this lead slip away. Without calling for backup or taking time to observe further, he strode purposefully toward her table. "Police. Don't move," he said, his voice just low enough not to cause a scene but firm enough to make Sophia jump in her seat. She looked up confused, her fingers freezing over her keyboard. "Excuse me? I said don't move." Officer Mercer positioned himself to block any potential escape route. The few customers nearby began to notice the interaction, some turning in their seats to watch. "Is something wrong?" Sophia asked, her heart beginning to race. She had never been in trouble with the law before. She didn't even have parking tickets. "I need to see some ID right now," Mercer demanded, his hand resting on his belt near his handcuffs. "Of course," Sophia replied, still bewildered. "My wallet is in my bag." She reached slowly toward her backpack on the seat beside her. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Officer Mercer snapped, his voice rising. The cafe grew quieter as more people turned to watch. Sophia froze, her hands mid-air. "I was just getting my ID like you asked. You think I'm stupid? Stand up slowly," he ordered. Sophia complied, her legs shaking slightly. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a student working on my thesis." "Yeah, I've heard every story in the book. Turn around." The fatigue of the past few days had worn down Mercer's patience to almost nothing. In his mind, this woman wasn't Sophia Chen, graduate student. She was Lisa Anderson, identity thief who had caused thousands of dollars in damages to over a dozen victims. "Can you at least tell me what this is about?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly as she turned around as instructed. "You match the description of a suspect wanted for multiple counts of identity theft and fraud," Mercer stated flatly. "Now where's your ID?" "It's in my bag like I was trying to tell you," Sophia said, pointing to her backpack without turning around. "The small pocket on the front." "Don't move," Mercer repeated, reaching for the bag himself. As he did, a book slid off the table and hit the floor with a loud thud. The sudden noise startled them both. Sophia instinctively turned back around and reached out. What happened next would be replayed on news channels and social media for weeks to come. Officer Mercer, operating on 3 days with minimal sleep and the stress of a high-profile case, interpreted Sophia's sudden movement as aggression. In a split-second reaction, his open hand connected with her cheek, the sound of the slap echoing through the now silent cafe. Sophia stumbled backward, her hip hitting the edge of the table. Her hand flew to her face, eyes wide with shock and pain. Tears immediately sprang to her eyes. "I told you not to move," Mercer shouted, grabbing her arm roughly. The cafe erupted in response. Several patrons jumped to their feet, phones already recording the incident. "Hey, she didn't do anything," called out a man from a nearby table. "That's assault," shouted another woman, moving closer with her phone held high. Sophia, still stunned by what had just happened, found her voice. "I'm not who you think I am. My name is Sophia Chen. I'm a graduate student at State University. Please, my student ID is right there in my bag." Officer Mercer, now aware of the numerous phones pointed in his direction, maintained his grip on Sophia's arm, but reached for her bag with his free hand. He pulled out her wallet and flipped it open to reveal her university ID card, complete with her photo and name. The blood drained from his face as he realized his mistake. You're not, he stammered, comparing her face to the grainy photo on his phone. Just then, the cafe door opened again, and 2 more police officers entered, responding to a call from a concerned patron. "What's going on here, Mercer?" asked one of them, taking in the scene. The crying young woman with a red mark forming on her cheek, the crowd of angry onlookers with phones raised, and Mercer's clearly shaken demeanor. I thought she was the Anderson suspect," he said, releasing Sophia's arm. She matched the description. The second officer, a woman named Officer Rivera, immediately went to Sophia's side. "Are you all right, miss? Do you need medical attention?" Sophia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "He hit me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just reaching for my ID." Officer Rivera shot a sharp look at Mercer, then turned back to Sophia with a gentler expression. "Let's sit down for a minute, okay? We'll get this sorted out." As Officer Rivera helped Sophia back to her seat, the other officer pulled Mercer aside. "What the hell happened?" "I got a tip that someone matching Anderson's description was here," Mercer explained, running a hand through his hair. "She made a sudden movement and I just reacted." "You reacted by slapping a civilian?" the officer hissed, keeping his voice low. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Mercer looked around at the crowd of witnesses, most still recording every word. His career flashed before his eyes. "I was sure it was her," he said weakly. Back at Sophia's table, Officer Rivera had gotten her a glass of water and was examining her cheek. "You're going to have a bruise," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry this happened. Would you like to file a complaint?" Sophia nodded, still too shocked to speak much. "Can someone call my parents?" she finally managed to ask. "My phone is somewhere." She looked around, disoriented. What neither Sophia nor any of the officers knew was that among the dozens of recordings already being uploaded to social media was one that would reach the desk of FBI Assistant Director Robert Chen within the hour. The same Robert Chen who had taught his daughter Sophia to respect law enforcement, to believe in the system, and to always tell the truth. The same Robert Chen who, upon seeing his daughter slapped by a police officer on camera, would set in motion an investigation that would shake the entire police department to its core. As Sophia sat trembling in the cafe, being comforted by Officer Rivera and several kind strangers who had witnessed the incident, she had no idea that this terrible moment would soon become the catalyst for sweeping change. All she knew was that something profoundly unjust had happened to her, and nothing would ever be the same again. The video spread like wildfire. By nightfall, it had been viewed over 1 million times. Officer slaps innocent student read the headlines. Each news channel played the clip on repeat. The moment when Officer Mercer's hand struck Sophia's face, the look of shock that followed, and the chaos that erupted afterward. Sophia sat wrapped in a blanket on her parents' couch, holding a bag of frozen peas against her cheek. The bruise had darkened to an ugly purple. Her mother, Lynn, sat beside her, arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. "You don't have to watch this again," Lynn said softly, reaching for the remote to turn off the news. "I need to," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than it had been hours earlier at the police station. "I need to understand what happened." Her father, Robert Chen, paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear. His face was a mask of controlled anger as he spoke in clipped professional tones. "Yes, Director Walsh, I understand the sensitivity. No, I'm not asking for special treatment." He paused, listening. "With all due respect, sir, if this had happened to anyone's daughter, I would want the same thorough investigation." Sophia watched her father, a man who had dedicated 22 years to the FBI, now fighting to keep his professional demeanor intact while his daughter sat bruised on his couch. She had never seen him like this, torn between his identity as a federal agent and his role as a father. Robert ended the call and sat heavily in the armchair across from Sophia. "Director Walsh is taking this seriously. The Bureau will be launching an official inquiry into the incident and the department's handling of it." "What does that mean?" Lynn asked. "It means," Robert said carefully, "that this won't be swept under the rug. The FBI has jurisdiction when civil rights violations occur. They're sending Agent Diana Harris from the Civil Rights Division to lead the investigation." Sophia nodded slowly. "What happens to Officer Mercer?" Robert sighed. That depends on the investigation and whether the department tries to protect him. He's been placed on administrative leave for now. Administrative leave, Lynn repeated bitterly. So he gets a paid vacation while our daughter is afraid to go back to the cafe where she's been studying for 2 years. Robert didn't argue. The truth was, he had seen too many cases where officers faced minimal consequences for misconduct. But he had also never imagined it would be his own daughter's face on the receiving end of that misconduct. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Lynn went to answer it. Mrs. Chen, a voice said from the doorway. I'm Captain Reynolds from the 12th Precinct. I was hoping I could speak with your family for a few minutes. Lynn's posture stiffened. My daughter has already given her statement to the police. I understand, ma'am. I'm not here to take another statement. I'm here to personally apologize on behalf of the department. Robert appeared behind Lynn. I think you should come in, Captain. We have a lot to discuss. Captain Reynolds, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, entered the living room. He removed his hat respectfully when he saw Sophia on the couch. Miss Chen, he began, his voice genuinely remorseful, I want to express my deepest apologies for what happened today. Officer Mercer's actions do not represent the values of our department or the oath we take to protect and serve. Sophia looked at him, her psychology training kicking in despite her emotional state. She noted his body language, the sincerity in his eyes, but also the careful choice of words. Thank you for coming in person, she said quietly. But I have to ask, if that video hadn't gone viral, would you be standing in my living room right now? The captain hesitated, and in that pause everyone knew the answer. I'd like to think we would have addressed this appropriately regardless, he finally said. But I won't lie to you. The visibility of this incident has certainly accelerated our response. Robert stepped forward. Captain? My daughter was assaulted by one of your officers for simply reaching into her bag after being asked for identification. This isn't just about a viral video. This is about accountability. I understand, Mr. Chen, and believe me, this is being taken very seriously. Is it? Robert challenged. Because I've already heard that Officer Mercer has had complaints filed against him before. Complaints that mysteriously didn't affect his record or lead to any meaningful disciplinary action. The captain's surprise was visible. I'm not sure where you're getting your information. I'm with the FBI, Captain. Information is what we do. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly, reassessing the situation. Officer Mercer has had 2 prior complaints. Neither involved physical contact with civilians. One was dismissed and one resulted in additional training. And what will happen this time? Sophia asked, sitting up straighter. Because I'm not going to let this disappear. I'm not going to be quiet about what happened to me. Nor should you be, the captain acknowledged. Officer Mercer has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. There will also be a separate review by the Civilian Oversight Board. Robert exchanged a look with his wife. And the FBI investigation? Are you prepared to cooperate fully with Agent Harris when she arrives tomorrow? For the first time, genuine surprise registered on the captain's face. The FBI? This is a local matter, Mr. Chen. With all due respect to your position. This isn't about my position, Robert cut in. This is about a potential civil rights violation. The FBI has clear jurisdiction in such cases, especially when there's evidence of a pattern. A pattern? The captain frowned. One incident doesn't. 3 complaints in 2 years isn't one incident, Captain, Robert said firmly. And I suspect when Agent Harris starts digging, she'll find more than just those 3. The tension in the room was palpable. Sophia watched the 2 men representing different aspects of law enforcement, facing off in her family's living room. I should go, Captain Reynolds finally said, replacing his hat. Miss Chen, again, I'm truly sorry for what happened. The department will be reaching out to discuss making this right. After he left, Sophia turned to her father. He seemed genuinely sorry. I'm sure he is, Robert replied. Sorry it happened. Sorry it was filmed. Sorry it's getting attention. But being sorry isn't enough, Sophia. Real change requires more than apologies. That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Officer Mercer's hand against her face, saw the anger in his eyes, relived the humiliation. Around 3 a.m., she got up and went to her laptop. The video had now been viewed over 3 million times. The comment section was filled with outrage. calls for justice, and sadly, some people defending the officer, claiming he was just doing his job, that she must have done something to provoke him. She scrolled through news articles about the incident. Most included her name and age. Some even had photos pulled from her social media accounts. Her private life was suddenly public property, all because an overworked cop couldn't tell the difference between a graduate student and a criminal. On impulse, Sophia created a new document and began typing. My name is Sophia Chen. Yesterday, I was studying in a cafe when a police officer approached me, accused me of being a criminal, and slapped me across the face when I reached for my ID. This is my story. Writing helped. She poured out every detail, every feeling, every consequence of those few terrible minutes. By morning, she had written over 5,000 words. When Agent Diana Harris arrived at the Chen household the next day, Sophia was ready. She handed the agent her written account along with printouts of the news articles and social media reactions. I want to make sure you have everything, Sophia explained. The whole story, not just what was caught on camera. Agent Harris, a woman in her 40s with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, nodded appreciatively. This is very helpful, Sophia. Most victims don't document their experiences this thoroughly. Most victims don't have an FBI agent for a father, Sophia said with a small smile. Actually, Agent Harris replied, your father had to recuse himself from any involvement in this investigation because of your relationship. I'm here because this case deserves attention, not because of who your father is. Sophia felt a new respect for the agent. Thank you. That means a lot. Now, Agent Harris said, taking out her recorder, I'd like you to walk me through what happened, in your own words. As Sophia began recounting her experience again, she felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, the trauma still fresh, but now there was something else too, a sense of purpose. This wouldn't just be about one officer or one incident. She would make sure of that. Across town, Officer James Mercer sat in his apartment, blinds drawn against the reporters camped outside. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages, some supportive from fellow officers, others filled with threats and abuse from strangers who had seen the video. His union representative had told him not to worry, that they would get him through this. The department would stand by him. It was just a misunderstanding, an unfortunate incident blown out of proportion. But as Mercer watched the video for the 100th time, saw himself strike a completely innocent young woman, he knew something the others didn't. He deserved whatever was coming, and deep down he feared that what was coming might change not just his life, but the entire department. What none of them realized yet was how far the ripples from this one incident would spread, or how many secrets would be exposed before it was over. Agent Diana Harris sat at the temporary desk she'd been assigned at the FBI field office, surrounded by stacks of folders. 3 days had passed since she'd first met with Sophia Chen, and what had initially seemed like a straightforward case of police misconduct was rapidly evolving into something much larger. She picked up the phone and dialed her supervisor in Washington. Sir, I think we need to expand the investigation, she said without preamble. This goes beyond Officer Mercer. Explain, her supervisor replied. I've reviewed Officer Mercer's personnel file. The 2 previous complaints against him were handled internally by Lieutenant Wilson. In both cases, witness statements were missing from the final reports. In one case, security camera footage that might have shown the incident was conveniently lost before it could be reviewed. She paused, flipping through her notes. But here's where it gets interesting. Lieutenant Wilson has handled at least 16 other misconduct complaints in the past 3 years. All of them were either dismissed or resulted in minimal disciplinary action. That's statistically improbable unless there's a systematic effort to protect officers. Her supervisor was silent for a moment. You're suggesting a cover-up. I'm suggesting a pattern, Diana corrected. One that deserves a closer look. I'd like to expand the investigation to include Lieutenant Wilson and possibly Captain Reynolds. Tread carefully, Harris, her supervisor warned. This is politically sensitive. The police union will fight back hard if they think we're on a fishing expedition. I understand, sir, but we have a duty to follow the evidence. After hanging up, Diana turned to the whiteboard where she'd mapped out the key players in the case. At the center was Sophia Chen, connected by lines to Officer Mercer, Captain Reynolds, and Lieutenant Wilson. She added a new name to the board. Internal Affairs Sergeant Paul Brenner. According to her sources, Sergeant Brenner had tried to properly investigate the second complaint against Mercer, but had been shut down by his superiors. If she could get him to talk, it might break the case wide open. Meanwhile, across town, Sophia Chen was facing her own challenges. She sat in her therapist's office, fidgeting with the strap of her watch. "I had the dream again last night," she admitted. "The one where I can't move." Dr. Patel nodded encouragingly. "Can you tell me more about it?" "I'm in the cafe and Officer Mercer is there. But this time when he approaches me, I'm frozen. I can't speak, I can't reach for my ID, I can't even blink. And then everyone around me freezes too, except him. He just keeps coming closer and closer." Sophia's voice trailed off. "I wake up feeling like I can't breathe." "That's a normal response to trauma," Dr. Patel explained gently. "Your body is processing what happened and trying to make sense of it. The feeling of being powerless is common among trauma survivors. But I don't want to be a survivor," Sophia said, frustration edging into her voice. "I was just a student working on my thesis and now suddenly I'm a victim, a survivor, a hashtag. People I don't even know are debating what happened to me online. Some of them are saying I deserved it." Dr. Patel leaned forward slightly. "How are you handling the public attention?"
"Not well," Sophia admitted.
"I had to delete my social media accounts. I've been staying with my parents because reporters keep showing up at my apartment. My advisor suggested I take the semester off, but then what? Hide away until everyone forgets about me? What do you want to do?" Dr. Patel asked. The question hung in the air for a moment as Sophia considered it. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else," she finally said. "I want real change, not just apologies and promises." When Sophia left the therapist's office, she was surprised to find a young woman waiting for her outside the building. "Sophia Chen?" the woman asked, approaching cautiously. "My name is Tina Wilson. I think we need to talk." Sophia tensed, immediately suspicious. "Are you a reporter?" "Because I'm not giving any more interviews." "No, nothing like that," Tina said quickly. "I saw what happened to you on the news. The thing is, the same officer did something similar to my brother 2 years ago." Sophia's wariness gave way to curiosity. "Officer Mercer?" Tina nodded. "My brother was walking home from work. Officer Mercer stopped him, said he matched the description of a robbery suspect. When my brother tried to show his work ID, Mercer grabbed him, threw him against the wall, and cuffed him so tight his wrist bled." "Did your brother file a complaint?" Sophia asked. "He tried, but the department said there wasn't enough evidence. No witnesses came forward, and it was his word against an officer's." Tina's voice hardened. "My brother spent the night in jail before they figured out they had the wrong person." "No apology, no nothing." Sophia felt a chill. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because people believe you," Tina said simply. "You have video. You have the FBI investigating. Maybe this time someone will actually listen." Later that day, Sophia sat with Agent Harris in a quiet corner of a different cafe, far from the one where the incident had occurred. Her story matches the timeline of the first complaint against Mercer. Agent Harris confirmed, checking her notes. The description is consistent too. Aggressive response to a civilian reaching for identification. "So, there's a pattern," Sophia said. "Yes, but more importantly, there's a witness now. Someone who can testify that the department knew about Mercer's behavior and did nothing to correct it." Agent Harris closed her notebook. "This could be crucial for establishing a pattern of deliberate indifference." "What does that mean?" Sophia asked. "It means the department might be legally liable for failing to properly train, supervise, or discipline Officer Mercer, especially if they knew he had these tendencies." Agent Harris paused. "Sophia, I need to ask, would you be willing to meet with Tina and her brother? Hearing their story directly might help our investigation." Sophia hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I want to hear everything." As the FBI investigation intensified, Officer Mercer was facing his own reckoning. He sat across from his union representative and the department's lawyer in a small conference room at police headquarters. "The situation is serious, James," the lawyer said bluntly. "The video doesn't leave much room for interpretation. The FBI is investigating and they're talking to other complainants now." "Other complainants?" Mercer repeated, genuinely surprised. "You mean the Wilson kid? That was different. He was aggressive and—" "Stop," the union rep interrupted. "Don't say another word about previous incidents. Not to me, not to anyone. The department is under pressure to take decisive action, the lawyer continued. The public is demanding it, the mayor is demanding it, and frankly, we need to show we're handling this appropriately. Mercer felt a growing sense of dread. What are you saying? We're saying you have two options, the union rep explained. Option 1, you fight this all the way, we back you as much as we can, but given the video evidence, you'll likely face criminal charges and eventually lose your job. And option 2? Mercer asked, his mouth dry. You resign immediately. The department agrees not to pursue criminal charges for the assault. You lose your badge, but you keep your freedom and your pension. Mercer stared at them, stunned. You're throwing me under the bus. After 12 years on the force. We're offering you a way out, the lawyer corrected. But you need to decide quickly, by tomorrow. As Mercer left the building through a back entrance to avoid the press, his phone buzzed with a text from Lieutenant Wilson. Need to talk. Meet me at Joe's, 8 p.m. At precisely 8 p.m., Mercer slid into a booth at the back of Joe's bar, a dingy establishment far from the usual police hangouts. Lieutenant Wilson was already there nursing a whiskey. They offered me a deal, Mercer said without preamble. Resignation in exchange for no criminal charges. Wilson nodded. Take it. Just like that? 12 years down the drain? Listen to me very carefully, Wilson said, leaning forward. This isn't just about you anymore. The FBI agent Harris, she's digging into other cases, other complaints. She's talking to Brenner from Internal Affairs. Mercer felt his stomach drop. Brenner hates your guts, exactly. And he knows everything. How we handled complaints, how reports were modified, all of it. Wilson downed his whiskey. If this keeps going, a lot of careers are going to end. And some people might end up facing charges a lot more serious than assault. So I'm the sacrifice, Mercer said bitterly. You're the firebreak. Wilson corrected. Take the deal. Disappear for a while and this whole thing might burn itself out before it reaches the rest of us. What Wilson didn't know was that in a car parked across the street, an FBI surveillance team was photographing their meeting and recording every word through the directional microphone pointed at their table. Agent Harris sat in the passenger seat, listening intently. We got them, she said quietly. This isn't about one bad officer anymore. This is about a system that protects its own at the expense of the public they're supposed to serve. As night fell over the city, 3 people lay awake thinking about justice and what it would cost them. Sophia Chen, wondering if she had the strength to face not just her own trauma, but to stand up for others who had been silenced. Officer James Mercer, realizing that the system he thought would always protect him, was preparing to sacrifice him to save itself, and Agent Diana Harris, knowing that what had started as an investigation into one officer's misconduct was about to expose corruption that ran through an entire police department, the next morning would bring decisions that would change all their lives, forever. The conference room at the FBI field office buzzed with tension. Agent Diana Harris stood at the head of the table, facing her team of investigators and the U.S. attorney assigned to the case. 2 weeks in, and we've uncovered at least 17 cases of excessive force that were deliberately buried by department leadership, Diana said, gesturing to the wall of photos and documents behind her. Officer Mercer isn't just one bad apple, he's a symptom of a much bigger problem. Do we have enough for charges? Asked the U.S. attorney, a serious woman named Patricia Gomez. Against Mercer, absolutely, Diana replied. The video alone would be enough. But we also have the testimony of Tina Wilson's brother and 3 other victims who've come forward since the story broke. She clicked to the next slide of her presentation. But the real target should be Lieutenant Wilson and Captain Reynolds. We have evidence they systematically covered up complaints, altered official reports, and intimidated witnesses. The recording from Joe's bar gives us Wilson explicitly admitting to modifying reports. Patricia leaned forward, studying the organizational chart on the screen. What about internal affairs? Where do they fit in all this? That's where it gets complicated, Diana admitted. Sergeant Brenner from IA tried to properly investigate several complaints but was overruled. He kept his own records, though, unofficial copies of the original reports before they were altered. He's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. And the police chief? Patricia asked. Diana hesitated. We don't have direct evidence linking him to the cover-ups, but it's hard to believe he was completely unaware. At minimum, he created an environment where this behavior could flourish. Patricia nodded slowly, weighing the political implications. Taking on a few officers was one thing. Taking on an entire police department, including its leadership, was another matter entirely. "We need to be airtight on this," she finally said. "No loose ends, no rushing. If we're going to do this, we do it right." Across town, Sophia Chen sat in an unfamiliar classroom, facing a group of about 30 police cadets. It had been 3 weeks since the incident at the cafe, and while the bruise on her face had faded, the impact of what happened continued to ripple outward. "Thank you for coming today, Ms. Chen," said the academy instructor, a reform-minded officer named Lieutenant Grace Alvarez. "I know this can't be easy for you." Sophia nodded, her hands slightly shaky as she adjusted the microphone. When Lieutenant Alvarez had first reached out, asking if she would be willing to speak to police cadets about her experience, her instinct had been to refuse, but Dr. Patel had suggested it might be healing to reclaim her narrative. "I'm not here to tell you all officers are bad," Sophia began, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. "My father has been in law enforcement for over 20 years. I grew up respecting the badge, but respect has to go both ways." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the young cadets. "What happened to me wasn't just about one officer having a bad day. It was about a system that taught him he could act that way and face no consequences. It was about a culture that valued protecting its own over protecting the public." For the next hour, Sophia shared her story, not just the incident itself, but its aftermath. The nightmares, the anxiety, the way she now tensed up whenever she saw a police uniform. The cadets listened intently, many taking notes, some visibly uncomfortable. "The officer who hit me made a split-second decision based on stress, fatigue, and poor training," Sophia concluded. "But the system that protected him made deliberate choices over years. Those choices hurt not just civilians like me, but good officers too, the ones who want to serve their communities with honor." After the session ended, several cadets approached Sophia to thank her for her honesty. One young woman hung back until the others had left. "Ms. Chen," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, my dad's a cop. He's been on the force for 15 years. He's a good man, but lately he's been talking about how the job has changed, how the pressure to make arrests and close cases has gotten worse." Sophia nodded encouragingly. "I joined the academy because I wanted to help people, like he does," the cadet continued. "But hearing your story makes me wonder if I can really make a difference in a system that's so broken. The fact that you're asking that question means you're exactly the kind of officer we need," Sophia replied. "Change doesn't just come from the outside. It has to come from within, too." As Sophia left the police academy, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and hope. When Lieutenant Alvarez had first approached her, she'd been suspicious of the officer's motives. But over the past week, as they'd prepared for the session, she'd come to see Alvarez as an ally, someone working for change from the inside while Sophia pushed from the outside. That evening, as Sophia was having dinner with her parents, her phone rang. It was Agent Harris. "Sophia, I wanted you to hear this from me first," Diana said without preamble. "Officer Mercer took the deal. He's resigned from the force. There won't be criminal charges for the assault." Sophia's grip tightened on her phone. "So he just walks away? After what he did to me, to Tina's brother, to who knows how many others?" "I know it feels like he's getting off easy," Diana acknowledged. "But his resignation opened doors for us. Without the department circling the wagons to protect him, more officers are talking. And Mercer himself has agreed to testify against Lieutenant Wilson and Captain Reynolds." "Testify about what?" Sophia asked. "About how they taught him to handle complaints, about reports that were altered, about a culture that prioritized arrest numbers over proper procedure." Diana paused. "This isn't just about one officer anymore, Sophia. We're building a case against the entire chain of command that enabled this behavior." After hanging up, Sophia explained the development to her parents. "So Mercer gets to keep his pension, while my daughter still jumps at sudden noises," Lynn said bitterly. Robert sighed. "It's how these cases work, Lynn. Prosecutors go after the biggest targets they can reach. Mercer was just a foot soldier. The generals are the ones who created the system." "And what about justice for what he did to me?" Sophia asked quietly. "You could still file a civil lawsuit," Robert suggested. "Even without criminal charges, you have a strong case for damages." Sophia was silent for a moment, considering. "Maybe, But I'm starting to think real justice isn't just about punishing Mercer. It's about changing things so this doesn't happen to someone else. Meanwhile, at police headquarters, Captain Reynolds sat alone in his office, staring at the letter of resignation he'd just finished typing. The walls were closing in. 3 of his officers had already been interviewed by the FBI. Internal affairs was no longer under his control, and this morning, he'd received a subpoena for all departmental records related to citizen complaints over the past 5 years. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. "Police Chief Thomas." Henderson entered, his expression grim. "We need to talk, Bill." Reynolds gestured to the chair across from his desk. "If it's about the FBI investigation, I've been cooperating fully." "Have you?" the chief asked, remaining standing. "Because I've been hearing that Sergeant Brenner from IA has turned over unofficial records. Records that don't match our official files." Reynolds felt sweat forming at his temples. "Tom, you know how it is. Sometimes complaints aren't substantiated. Sometimes officers deserve the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes," the chief said coldly, "department leaders manipulate the system to protect bad officers because it's easier than admitting we have a problem." Reynolds blinked in surprise. This wasn't the conversation he'd expected. "The mayor called me into his office this morning," the chief continued. "The FBI briefed him on their investigation. It's bad, Bill, really bad. They have recordings, testimonies, documents, enough to bring RICO charges against half the command staff." "RICO? That's for organized crime." "Exactly." The chief's voice was flat. "The U.S. attorney is arguing that the systematic cover-up of police misconduct constitutes a criminal enterprise." Reynolds slid his resignation letter across the desk. "I was just about to submit this." The chief didn't even glance at it. "It's too late for that. The FBI will be making arrests tomorrow morning. The only question now is who's going to cooperate and who's going to fight it out in court." As the chief left, Reynolds sat back in his chair, the full weight of what was happening finally hitting him. 27 years on the force, and it was ending like this. All because one officer couldn't keep his temper in check, and because Reynolds himself had chosen the easy path of covering up problems rather than addressing them. What he didn't know was that across the city, 16 other officers were having similar moments of reckoning as the consequences of years of unchecked misconduct finally caught up with them, and at the center of it all was a young woman who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but who now found herself at the heart of a movement for change that would transform not just one police department, but potentially law enforcement practices across the country. 6 months after the slap that changed everything, Sophia Chen stood on the steps of the federal courthouse surrounded by reporters. The morning sun glinted off the building's glass facade, creating a halo effect around the crowd. The plea agreements announced today mark a turning point not just for our city, but for police accountability nationwide. U.S. Attorney Patricia Gomez announced to the assembled press. Former Lieutenant Wilson and Captain Reynolds have pleaded guilty to conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. 4 other officers have admitted to falsifying reports and intimidating witnesses. Sophia listened, still finding it hard to believe how far things had come. What had begun as a case about one officer's misconduct had uncovered a web of corruption that stretched back over a decade. In addition to the criminal pleas, Patricia continued, the Department of Justice and city officials have reached an agreement on a consent decree that will fundamentally reform police practices. This includes independent oversight, mandatory body cameras, new use of force protocols, and a complete overhaul of how civilian complaints are handled. As the press conference ended, reporters surged toward Sophia, shouting questions. Agent Diana Harris stepped in, creating a protective barrier. Ms. Chen has been through enough, Diana said firmly. She'll release a statement later today. They made their way through the crowd to a waiting car. Once inside, Sophia let out a long breath. You did it, Diana said, squeezing Sophia's hand. This wouldn't have happened without you, Sophia shook her head. I didn't do anything special. I just refused to be silenced. That's what makes it special, Diana replied. Most people in your position would have taken a settlement and moved on. You insisted on real change. The car pulled away from the courthouse, carrying them through downtown streets that somehow looked different to Sophia now. The same buildings, the same traffic, but everything had changed, including herself. Later that afternoon, Sophia sat in a community center meeting room, facing a circle of people whose lives had also been affected by police misconduct. What had begun as an informal support group had evolved into the Community Justice Alliance, an organization dedicated to police reform and victim advocacy. The consent decree is a start, Sophia told the group, but it's just words on paper until we see real changes on the street. That's why our community monitoring program is so important. Tina Wilson, whose brother's case had helped establish the pattern of misconduct, nodded in agreement. We need to make sure these reforms actually happen, not just fade away once the headlines stop. An older man named George, who had joined the group after his grandson was wrongfully arrested, raised his hand. I heard they're appointing a new police chief. Any word on who it might be? The mayor has narrowed it down to 3 candidates, Sophia replied. All of them from outside the department, all with strong records on community policing. And all 3 have agreed to meet with our group before a final decision is made. There was a murmur of approval around the room. 6 months ago, the idea that community members would have input on selecting the police chief would have seemed impossible. We've also secured funding for our civilian trauma support program, Sophia continued. Anyone who experiences or witnesses police misconduct will have access to free counseling services. As the meeting continued, Sophia felt a now familiar mix of emotions: pride in what they'd accomplished, determination to keep pushing for change, and a lingering sadness for what had been lost. Her career plans had been derailed. She'd had to take a leave of absence from her graduate program after the media attention made it impossible to focus on her studies. But in its place, she'd found a new purpose. The psychology training that was supposed to lead to a clinical practice was now being used to help trauma survivors and to build bridges between communities and police. After the meeting, Sophia checked her phone and found a text from an unknown number. Can we talk? It's important. James Mercer. She stared at the screen, her heart suddenly racing. She hadn't seen or spoken to Officer Mercer since that day in the cafe. During the investigation and subsequent trials, all communication had gone through lawyers. Sophia showed the text to Tina, who frowned. Are you going to meet him? I don't know, Sophia admitted. Part of me never wants to see him again. But another part needs closure, Tina finished for her. Sophia nodded. I'll think about it. That evening, Sophia discussed the text with her parents over dinner. You don't owe him anything, her mother said immediately. After what he did to you. I know, Mom, Sophia interrupted gently. But this isn't about what I owe him. It's about what I need to move forward. Her father was quiet for a moment before speaking. In my years with the Bureau, I've seen what happens when people don't get closure. It can eat away at you for decades. You think I should meet him? Sophia asked, surprised. I think you should do whatever feels right for you, Robert replied. But if you do meet him, you don't go alone. I'll be nearby. The next day, Sophia sat at a table in a quiet corner of a public library, her father positioned at a desk across the room, pretending to read a newspaper. Her hands were steady, but her stomach was in knots as she waited. James Mercer looked different out of uniform, smaller somehow, less intimidating. His face was lined with stress and his hair had more gray than Sophia remembered. He approached the table hesitantly. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, he said, his voice low. Sophia nodded but didn't speak. I've written this speech in my head 100 times, Mercer continued, sitting down across from her, about how sorry I am, how I never meant for things to go the way they did. But none of it seems adequate. Why did you want to see me? Sophia asked directly. Mercer looked down at his hands. I'm leaving town next week, moving to be closer to my sister. Before I go, I needed to face you properly, not in a courtroom, not through lawyers, just human to human. To apologize? Sophia's tone was neutral. Yes, but also... He hesitated. I wanted you to know that what happened that day, what I did to you, it forced me to confront things about myself, about the job that I'd been ignoring for years. Sophia studied him, using her training to read his body language, the tension in his shoulders, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. The department shaped me into someone I never wanted to be, Mercer continued. The pressure to make arrests, to close cases, to never show weakness, it changes you. But that's not an excuse. I had choices and I made the wrong ones. Not just with me, Sophia said quietly. Mercer nodded. I know. I've spent the past 6 months thinking about all the people I hurt, Tina's brother. The others. I can't undo what I did, but I've been trying to make amends where I can. How? Sophia asked, genuinely curious. I've been working with the Justice Department identifying other cases of misconduct that weren't in the official records, and I've been speaking at police trainings about what went wrong, how to prevent officers from going down the same path. They talked for almost an hour, not as victim and perpetrator, but as two people trying to make sense of an event that had altered both their lives. Sophia didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't something she could give yet, maybe ever. But she did find something she hadn't expected: understanding. As they prepared to leave, Mercer handed her an envelope. I've written letters to everyone I can remember mistreating on the job. Yours was the hardest to write. Sophia took the envelope but didn't open it. I can't promise I'll read it. I know, Mercer said. That's your choice. I just wanted you to have it. 1 year to the day after the incident at the cafe, Sophia returned there for the first time. The owner, who had been a witness and later a supporter, greeted her with a warm hug. It's good to see you back here, he said. Sophia smiled. It feels strange but good. She chose a different table than the one she'd sat at that fateful day, ordered a coffee, and opened her laptop. On the screen was the final draft of her thesis, not the one she'd originally planned to write, but a new project examining the psychological impact of police misconduct on communities and pathways to healing. As she worked, she was aware of the changes around her. A new community policing officer stopped by the cafe, greeting customers and leaving his card with the owner. Posters on the bulletin board advertised the Civilian Oversight Board's monthly meeting and free legal aid for those filing complaints against the police. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tina. We got the grant. Training starts next month. The grant would fund a program that paired mental health professionals with police, officers on calls involving people in crisis, a program Sophia had helped design based on her own experience. Outside, life went on. People hurried past the cafe windows, caught up in their own concerns. Most of them had no idea that what had happened in this space a year ago had set in motion changes that were still unfolding. Sophia took a sip of her coffee and continued typing. The bruise on her cheek had long since faded, but its impact remained, in new policies, in reformed institutions, and in her own life's unexpected new direction. What had begun with pain had evolved into purpose. And though the journey wasn't over, Sophia Chen had discovered her own power to turn a moment of injustice into a movement for lasting change.